Hi, everybody. Welcome to our newest episode of Closing Strong. I am Tara McGowan, founder and publisher of COURIER, and joined by my co-host and friend Simon Rosenberg of Hopium Chronicles. We have a great show for you guys today. We are going to be talking to Jane Kleeb, who is the chair of the Nebraska Democratic Party and the founder and president of Bold Alliance. And Nebraska is playing a very unique and outsized role in this election. We're going to hear more about that later. And we're also joined by Adam Mockler, a really incredible, energetic, smart content creator who has over 500,000 subscribers on YouTube. We interviewed him on his 22nd birthday, but he's been doing that for much longer. So we're going to dig into the role content creators are playing in this election. But first and foremost, Simon, we had the vice presidential debate this week, and I would love to hear your impressions of it.
Yeah, I mean, look, it was my initial impression, and as I wrote in Hopium Chronicles this week, was I was just overwhelmed by the scale of the lying from JD Vance. And it's possible that because I've been in this business for so long and I know a lot of the policy issues that were debated and discussed last night, that I was a little bit more sort of attuned or aware of the scale and intentionality of the lying. I mean, it's very clear that what the Vance and Trump campaign did last night was they took advantage of the idea that there was going to be no fact checking, and they invented crazy stories and things to deflect from their extremism of the danger that they represent to the country. It was sort of a fable. JD Vance came and told us these stories of which they were almost entirely untrue, inventions way beyond lying. We don't even have the right words in English to describe this kind of fictional fabulism that we saw last night. And it was just on such a shocking scale, to be honest. And I'll give you one example, right? The exchange about guns coming from Mexico.
The gross majority, close to 90% in some of the statistics I've seen, of the gun violence in this country is committed with illegally obtained firearms. And while we're on that topic, we know that thanks to Kamala Harris's open border, we've seen a massive influx in the number of illegal guns run by the Mexican drug cartels. So that number, the amount of illegal guns in our country is higher today than it was 3.5 years ago.
Just so everybody understands, there are no guns made in Mexico. Guns are illegal in Mexico. All the guns in Mexico that the cartels have come from the United States and come from unscrupulous dealers of weapons, often unlicensed on the border, that make a living selling American weapons into the cartels in Mexico. This idea that he invented an entire story about how the gun violence in the United States is due to guns, American guns that were purchased legally and then somehow smuggled back into the United States. I've been working on border and immigration issues for 20 years. I've never heard anything remotely as crazy as that. And they had to sit there and practice that. Like, they had to invent that story because it's fundamentally untrue. And it was, again, a reinforcement of the core need for them to demonize the other. Somehow the gun violence problem in America is due to immigrants, right? Like, the whole thing was just so shocking. And so, I think that shame on CBS, frankly, for allowing this to happen. And I can't believe that 2 out of the 3 debates that we've had so far have been, the Trump campaign was successful at getting major networks to agree not to challenge anything that they said during the debates. It was disappointing for us and a sort of disservice to the American people.
Well, I actually think that was one of the most viral moments to come out of the debate was when Margaret Brenner did actually fact check JD Vance, and he stopped and he said,
just to clarify for our viewers, Springfield, Ohio does have a large number of Haitian migrants who have legal status. Right. Temporary protected status.
Well, Margaret, but
thank you, Senator. We have so much to get to.
Margaret, I think it's important because
we're going to turn out of the economy. Thank
Margaret,
you.
The rules were that you guys weren't going to fact check, and
that was a pretty important moment, and it was a pretty clarifying moment, I think, for audiences who were watching, because it demonstrated the terms of which he and the Trump campaign are willing to engage, right? Where they are not fact-checked on their lies and the stories that they weave out of thin air to build a case for their extremist policies. And also just touches on sort of the state of media today. I actually, I don't disagree with you about the format of the debates and the agreements that were made at the corporate level with the campaigns. I think there's a lot to dig in there. But I do want to give a shout out to Nora and Margaret, the moderators of the debate, because I do think that they did an exceptional job with the format and the rules of the road they were kind of given.
Yeah,
And Margaret stepping outside of those rules to actually ensure that a fact was given to refute JD's lies in that moment showed him for his true colors. And I think, a lot of the quick takeaways were that it was either, a tie or JD Vance won because of how slick he was. I think he had an easier job than Tim Walz and took that job seriously to introduce himself for the first time on his terms to the American people, since most people who know who JD Vance is, frankly, know based on memes of really egregious, horrific, misogynist things he said over the course of his very short political career. But I do think that some of the most poignant moments in the debate last night, at least for me, were when there were moments that chipped away at the facade he had carefully crafted and curated to present himself as. Because we know that JD Vance is a liar. He is a chameleon, right? He is someone who likened Trump to Hitler and is now his running mate and his most staunch defender to the national public. And we watched him in real time weave in completely false narratives, which, by the way, he has also admitted to.
right.
The American media totally ignored this stuff until Donald Trump and I started talking about cat memes. If I have to,
But it
if I
wasn't
have
just
to
a meme,
create stories so that the American media actually pays attention to the suffering of the American people, then that's what I'm going to do, Dana.
So the bar is just in hell, really, when it comes to accountability for the truth in our politics today. But I do think that we were able to see some glimpses of his true colors. And it was all those moments where we didn't, and we saw the facade he wanted to project that showed some level of competence and strength.
Yeah, and I think to, play the role of Tara here for a second, I think the thing that is going to come out of the debate in the aftermath, given that there was probably very low viewership and that many people will be forming their impression of what happened based on moments, as you call them, that we will all get to see on social media and through our networks. There was that moment where he sort of said, "What are you doing fact checking me? I thought I was able to come up here and lie with impunity." It was a shocking moment, right, where he broke out of character. But the other one was the exchange where he refused to condemn insurrection and commit to the full, the integrity of our democracy.
And it manifested itself because of Donald Trump's inability to say. He is still saying he didn't lose the election. I would just ask that. Did he lose the 2020 election?
Tim, I'm focused on the future. Did Kamala Harris censor Americans from speaking their mind in the wake of the 2020 COVID situation?
That is a damning non-answer.
And that's going to be the clip, I think, that over the next few days will really define this debate. And it was one that was devastating for Vance. He seemed so cavalier in his dismissal of the importance of, agreeing to the basic terms of when a candidate wins an election, right? They get to win and you don't contest and try to overturn the election results. And it was really, for what was a very kind of sure-footed performance by him, this was a catastrophic moment for him politically that's going to haunt him, I think, not just in this election, but for many years to come, because of the way that he answered it. It wasn't just his answer. It was this sort of cavalier, like, I'm looking forward. Like, I don't really care that, we try to overturn the election before, as if it was unimportant, right? In a democracy, it's the greatest political crime you can commit in a democracy to try to overturn an election. So I do think that this is going to become definitional. And the campaign, already had out on, Wednesday morning, they already had an ad out using this clip, and it's all over the internet already. And so, hats off again to the campaign. The Harris-Walz campaign has been really pioneered rapid response and quick response, video-based quick response, in a way that has really transformed our politics this cycle. And I'm really proud of them for this. I mean, this has been a big innovation, and I think they've been able to really help define moments in ways that I think was harder for older campaigns to do in this new media environment.
Yeah, no, they absolutely understand that the debate, the impact of the debate is not on the people that are watching at home on television. There was actually this amazing meme that was going viral in certainly my circles of a Venn diagram, but it's just two circles standing on their own, where the one on the left is, like rabid, hand-wringing political junkies obsessed with this election and like, biting their nails over the election. And then the other circle on its own is undecided voters. And there's just no cross of the two for the debate watchers, because it's fairly true, right? And yet the clips are what matter. They reach a ton more people who don't tune into traditional media, which are the voters who will choose the election, whether they're younger or they're older passive news consumers. They're not watching on television. They're not watching live. It's what clips reach them in their feeds. And that one in particular, I think, is really damning. And for folks who did see any of the, the more projecting JD Vance, and where he, projected compassion, projected empathy in some of his answers, especially related to abortion, which was particularly sickening for me to watch, given his position on abortion, for him to play that hypocrisy, really using, if it is a true story, a real woman's personal story to make himself look more compassionate on an issue he is not compassionate on. If you had seen that moment and didn't know anything about JD Vance, but then you did see the moment where he would not agree that the election was not stolen in 2020, then where you saw it all fall apart. You saw the projected version that he wanted to show America fall apart, because when push comes to shove, he actually will do whatever Trump wants him to do. He is a shill for Trump, and essentially for whoever Trump is a shill for, mainly Putin comes to mind. And I think that was really an important moment, because you did see him struggle. You saw him visually, physically kind of struggle as he tried to worm his way out of that question and answer.
Yeah, and it was surprising given that he had to know it was coming, right? I mean, this was one of the obvious questions that was going to happen. But, listen, I think politically, they did, it was not a good night for Trump and Vance, because they didn't achieve their fundamental objective in the debate, which is that they have to change the trajectory of the election that they're losing. And that didn't happen in the debate. We see from polling that it was sort of even Steven, and that, it was sort of 50-50 for the people who watched, right? I think we'll win in the aftermath, right? And as we've been discussing. But their political goal is they're losing this election right now, and we're winning it. And they need to change the trajectory of the election for them to have a chance to win. And that didn't happen last night. And they don't have another big moment ahead of them. It's all in the grind now. And the grind over the next, 30 plus days favors us, because we've got, we're ahead in national polling. We're in better shape in the battlegrounds. We're closer to 270. This thing is still super close and super competitive. But in the grind, as we execute our plans, we have more volunteers, more money. We're going to have more ads up in the air. We're going to be reaching more voters through our field operations. We're doing better in social media and the vibes war, as you so often talk about. And, we also have a huge enthusiasm advantage. And so I think that we're ahead today by a little bit, but our ability to move the election towards us is much greater than theirs. And I think it's why it will be interesting to see if Trump ends up acquiescing to a second debate in late October. I mean, one of the things that happened that we just learned about, shockingly, is that the Trump campaign pulled out of a 60 Minutes interview that Harris is doing and will air next week. And they explicitly said the reason they pulled out of the interview was because there was going to be fact checking, and that Trump wasn't going to just be able to lie with impunity. And it's incredible they admitted to that, right? Like the idea that he has to be able to say whatever he wants unchallenged, is now a central way of their trying to conduct themselves with the media. And the problem is that, and I think the last point I want to make about this is that because we're getting in the grind now, and because there isn't normally there would be two more presidential debates, all of us have to help bring some of the energy and passion and intensity that would have normally been created by these presidential debates into our discourse. Kamala Harris needs us more than usual, because she's not going to have these big national events in the end when people are starting to really pay attention to speak to voters. And so the work that we all do, in volunteering and postcarding and everything else, it's going to matter probably in these next 35 days more than usual. And that's why I'm confident that we're going to be able to execute off that opportunity better than the other side.
I think that's exactly right. And I think continuing to reinforce the contrast between the two and their character and their vision for the country is important. I also think the vice president has given folks a lot more to work with, right, in terms of her policy plans, especially related to the economy and the opportunity agenda that a lot of Americans, frankly, given the timeline that we are on, don't know about yet. The ones who are not consuming any traditional media or actively following the campaigns. And that's the work of all of us, is to really break down and share and inform folks about those policies and all the ways for the ones who might have a question. They might not never vote for Trump, but if they don't really know what she stands for and economy is their biggest issue, I think that there's a lot to work with and a lot of work to do and very little time to do it. And so we know that she and the campaign are working their tails off to reach as many folks as possible in as many ways as possible. But it is on all of us to share the good content, share all of the stories we're producing out of Courier, and forward the Hopium Chronicles to folks so people have more to work with, more just digestible, easy things that they can share and repeat that are factual and true, but also, most importantly, new information for a lot of people who just need that extra nudge, who are really concerned about housing affordability or jobs or what have you. There is a plan. There are policies in place. We actually hear about that a little bit in the conversation with Adam later on about how you can reach people with this stuff because they're not finding it otherwise. So we do have a lot of work to do. I would love to hear, as always, Simon, what is kind of, just 30 something days out, what is the state of the race as you're seeing it, and the state of the polar coasters, because it's been a week of that as well.
Yeah, I mean, a couple quick things, and I sort of alluded to it earlier, is that the polling's been very stable. I mean, the two weekly tracks that I feel like are kind of the baseline every week, the Morning Consult poll and the YouGov Economist poll showed no change. The Economist YouGov, she's up 3, the Morning Consult, she's up 5. We got new polling from the Cook Report in the battleground showing her all 7 states competitive, but us in a much better position in the 7 states. We also have gotten polling in Nebraska too, which we'll be talking about a little bit later, showing us in a very strong position in the blue dot, as it's called, which is important because we're doing well in Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. And if we win those 3 states, we get to 269. We add the blue dot, we're at 270, we win the election. And then we go fight it out. Yeah, and then we go fight it out in these 4 other states. And I think that, the other thing that's new that we don't know, the kind of big unknown, is what happens in Georgia and North Carolina due to Helene and the storm. We'll have to see. It's still very fresh and new. It's very unclear how that's going to affect the election. And I think the other thing that I find that I think is very encouraging, and this is part of the closing strong theme, because as I discussed, I think we have a far greater capacity to close strong than they do. And I think it's much more likely that we push the election towards us in these final 30 plus days than they push it towards them because of our advantages. But one of the things I learned this week is that, there's been this new movement around postcarding where people who are in many cases a little bit older, who don't have the ability to canvass or don't like to make phone calls. In the past, it would be very hard for those kinds of volunteers to be directly involved in voter contact. And now there's been a revolution in what's called postcarding, where people write handwritten postcards to swing voters in battleground, or swing or Democrats, but to voters in battleground parts of the country. And this movement has really exploded in recent years. And the estimate is now that 80 million postcards are going to be mailed between October 1st and October 18th. So millions of postcards have begun to be mailed in places like California that has their early vote begins next week. And it's another tool in our toolbox that is an innovation, right? It may be old school, but
Snail mail postcards are an innovation, but it's true.
Yeah.
They're having their moment for sure.
They're having their moment, and 80 million, like there are going to be a lot of letter carriers in the battleground who are going to have bad backs in the next couple of weeks.
But who doesn't love opening their mailbox? I know a lot of people don't send snail mail, but who doesn't love getting a handwritten note in their mailbox amidst all the bills and the flyers and the spam?
Yeah, and I just want to thank all the incredible people who've been banking these postcards. Some of these postcards were written a year ago 9 months ago, 6 months ago, and they're sitting, I've put pictures up on
I
Hopium.
hope they swap out the nominees' names, Simon.
I know. Well, but people have been storing them and getting them ready to go. And this batch goes on October 1st, and this batch goes on October 3rd. And it is an unprecedented new tool, right? I think the way to think about it is that's like the equivalent of like a huge super PAC, hundreds of millions of dollars worth of voter contact. But that's all been done organically, not organized by the campaign. Regular citizens use this tool to go out to reach to their fellow citizens. There's something really kind of fundamentally American, small d democratic, love of country in this process. And I just want to thank all the folks that have been behind this. This is a major undertaking that is a powerful new part of how our family operates. And that, we're leaving it, what's the line people use? All gas, no brakes, right? In the way that we're approaching the election. And so it's an exciting time. I mean, I think for me, Tara, as somebody who's been doing this a long time, the thing that makes this election so compelling and awesome and interesting is just the passion of our side. It's not just the intensity and the enthusiasm, it's the passion. It's the sense of mission and then how important this work is and how important people are taking it so seriously because they feel like their democracy is on the line, and it is. And J.D. Vance made that clear in the debate this week. And so, I want to end our little segment by just doing a big shout out to all the proud patriots around the country who work their ass off for their democracy. You're making a huge difference, and I'm really proud to be in this fight with all of you.
Yeah, and it really is the truest essence of small d democracy, right? It's about wanting to be part of something bigger than yourself and contributing what you can to it. And it's really beautiful. It is the way we will and should win, because that's exactly what we're trying to save and foster. So couldn't agree more. Really grateful for everything everyone is doing around this country, no matter what their engagement level or resources are. Every single postcard, every single call, text, every single dollar to these campaigns and efforts makes a difference. And we've got, just a few weeks left to do all of those things. So I love that, Simon. Well, let's get into it with our guests.
We've got a great segment with Jane Kleeb, my dear friend, who's the Nebraska Democratic Party chair. And Jane, welcome.
Thanks for having me. So excited to be back on with you.
I know. Listen, the premise of our series is closing strong. And we're sort of talking to people who are out there helping us close strong. And what I think about you is like, here you are in this blue dot, this place that in our minds is always kind of far away. And yet you're here with the presidential. You've got a competitive House race. You've got a competitive Senate race, right? You had all the back and forth on whether the blue dot was going to not be a blue dot. And now our candidate for vice president is from Nebraska. Jane, you've gone from being far away to the center of everything in the election. How does it feel? Give us an update on everything.
Yeah, we couldn't be more excited. And we have First Lady Walz coming to our Ben Nelson Gala, which is our annual Democratic dinner on Saturday. So we definitely feel like a lot of eyes are on us. And for us, this just didn't come out of nowhere. We've been building the base of our party across the state, but obviously, of course, in Omaha and Lincoln, our two blue dots, if you will, for the past 10 years. We've been building down ballot. We've been creating programs like our Block Captain program, our voter guides, our aggressive vote by mail program. So we feel prepared to meet the moment, and we're glad the moment is here.
For folks that are listening who don't know actually very much about Nebraska, who follow national politics or presidential politics, and they hear about it, about this blue dot, can you just kind of give a lay of the land, all this amazing work you guys have been doing on the ground? Tell us a little bit about actually the demographics and the politics historically in Nebraska and kind of what turn you're seeing happen on the ground there.
Yeah, so I always say we're the cheapest battleground state. We're 1.9 million people across the entire state, but basically about 500,000 in the 2nd Congressional District, where it really does look like a slice of America. You have a strong union presence in South Omaha. We have a lot of meatpacking facilities and other manufacturing plants. We have strong African American and Latino communities, as well as Asian American and Native Americans. You have a lot of middle class folks who are highly educated. There's 2 major universities in the area, plus big medical facilities like the UNMC, Blue Cross Blue Shield, of course, Warren Buffett and lots of other Fortune 500 companies are there. And then you have this beautiful network of small businesses that are owned by a lot of young people, tech startups. The tech guys in the 2nd Congressional District call themselves the Silicon Prairie. So you have a lot of interesting dynamics happening with young people, with middle-class voters, with suburban voters. And then we have military folks. The Offutt military base, part of that is in the 2nd Congressional District as well, including a rural county. So you couldn't ask for a better kind of microcosm of America. And to prove that door-to-door canvassing, phone banking, texting, the voter guides, all the kind of activities that we do in the election cycle, that's actually what wins elections.
Two things we'd love you to reflect on. One is the battle over whether or not the blue dot was going to go away, and just reflect on that a little bit. And also, there's a lot of interest in the Senate race, obviously, in addition to the House race, which seems to be going well. But just give us a little bit of a flavor of the battle over the blue dot, and also an update on the Senate race.
Yeah. So that was an intense 72 hours. Senator Mike McDonald used to be a Democrat and was for several decades. He is a union leader, has a lot of shared values with the Democratic Party. There was major division within the party over trans rights and abortion access. He sided with the Republicans on both of those issues and decided to become a Republican. That didn't, though, end the 18-year relationship I have with Mike and several others have with the senator. So when this came back up, we felt like it was more political theater that Donald Trump and all the other cronies that were coming on the ground were doing in order to please Trump, to try to show that they were trying their best to get that electoral vote changed. But we definitely felt like Mike was going to stick with us. But then there were some signs where we began to get worried. And so over 72 hours, there were lots of conversations. The Harris-Walz team assisted as well. The Trump side was obviously putting in their calls to Mike and having meetings, and so were we. But I do think that longtime relationship that we had with the senator, and he's also planning on running for mayor of Omaha in May. It's a nonpartisan race, so the top two will get out. And he doesn't want to piss off the Democrats. The Democrats are really excited. There are literally homemade blue dots in addition to Harris-Walz signs and Tony Vargas signs and Dan Osborne signs all over that district. So Mike also saw that energy on the ground. So I think the one thing that definitely kept him with us was, one, he gave his word to voters, and he's a person of his word. He really doesn't go back. He's a kind of a straight shooter. And then he saw all that energy. So that worked in our favor. And you're seeing Dan Osborne. Look, Dan Osborne is a true independent. We wanted him to take our endorsement. In the beginning, he had planned on taking that endorsement, but he decided to change his mind. And we respect that. I always tell people, my name is not on the ballot as the party chair, right? It's candidates' own names. And so they have to make decisions for their campaign that they think is best for them to win the election and be honest with voters. Dan's a true independent. He's more conservative on issues like guns and immigration, and definitely is, with us on making sure that Roe v. Wade gets restored. And so we have a lot of shared values. I think the vast majority of Democrats are going to be voting for him. We decided not to do a write-in candidate, which obviously would have hurt him, because about 10 to 15% of the Democrats would have wrote in whoever we were instructing them to do. So we believe a cross-partisan coalition is going to pull Dan Osborne over the finish line. Deb Fischer has been totally absent the past decade. She's been in the U.S. Senate. Younger voters have no idea who she is. A lot of the rural voters are mad at her over issues like property rights and water rights. So he has a very clear path, and the polling is showing that.
Because you mentioned young people, Jane, talk a little bit about, because I just think it's such a beautiful story, and the fact that he is a truly independent candidate. We're seeing across the whole country, especially in battleground states, that young people are more and more identifying as independent, right? They're not siding with either party. They're really focused on the issues. I'm curious if you're seeing that mirrored there as well. And also, I'm just so excited about the idea of the story, if he is successful in the Senate race, getting out to more states, because it feels a lot like the politics a lot of people are craving, which is less kind of party focused. I'm curious just kind of what that feeling is, especially around young people and their organizing in that race in particular.
As somebody who has spent a lot of her life in party politics, I feel very torn about this issue because I know that a strong party infrastructure, if Dan wins, is going to be one of the big reasons why he does win, right? He relied on the 93 county parties across the state in order to gather signatures, put up signs. The biggest chunk of his votes will clearly be from the Democratic Party. And when I became chair, we changed our party rules to allow independents to vote in our partisan primary elections. We really do believe the reason we won Keystone XL, the reason we increased the minimum wage, the reason we got Dreamer's driver's license. I mean, the list is really long of progressive wins that have happened in Nebraska. It's been because the Democrats have joined hands and opened our doors to independents and Republicans who don't like the extremes of a Trump or a Tea Party Republican Party. So independents are definitely growing. In our state, we have about 35% Dems, 20% independents. We know if we join forces that we definitely do win elections, and you see that down ballot. Our party's gone from 500 Democrats elected to over 900 Democrats elected since I've been chair because we have formed that coalition. I think that coalition is also going to be why Harris and Walz win the blue dot electoral vote in the 2nd congressional district and why Senator Tony Vargas is going to win. And I will say that, we couldn't do any of this. Like, we have a Young Dem organizer now. We've dedicated almost $20,000 just to Young Democrats organizing. We couldn't do any of this without the folks who subscribe to Simon's podcast and newsletter. The reality is we've raised $220,000 into our party so we can run real grassroots party infrastructure. And I cannot emphasize that enough. The DNC has given us more money, absolutely, under Chair Harrison and President Ken Martin with the ASDC. But $220,000 in a state like Nebraska is major game-changing money that will result in a lot of the wins that we're talking about.
Jane, it warms my heart when you say that. And I want to just also give a big shout out to the Hopium, now 120,000 members of the Hopium community who have really rallied for you, for Anderson Clayton in North Carolina, for Ruben Gallego in Arizona, for 15 key House races. I mean, it's been really amazing to see how when I've called this community, they've always answered. And I am really proud of what we've done here. I mean, we got in early with you. We knew there was a real opportunity here, and it's great to see it playing out. But I guess the one thing we haven't talked about is what happened when Kamala Harris picked Governor Walz, a native of Nebraska, to be on the ticket. I mean, what did that do to the coalition and the energy in the state?
Yeah, so you're not only seeing a Nebraskan from Omaha or Lincoln, you're seeing a Nebraskan from rural part of our state, from the sandhills of our state, who was a teacher, was in the military. So there's a huge sense of pride that a Nebraskan is on the ticket. You see a lot of folks with Coach Wall signs like I have behind me. We had pep rally potlucks all across the state of Nebraska for the debate watch party on Tuesday, where people were making his turkey hot dish and were making Kamala Harris's Munster cookies. And it was just a big, fun pep rally because we have one of our own on the ticket. And it feels really refreshing that you have Harris and Walz actually talking about rural issues and talking about housing and healthcare. And of course, ag, which is important to rural communities, especially in rural Nebraska. But we care about our public schools, making sure that we have access to mental health care. And when they put out their rural policy paper, it wasn't only focused on ag. It definitely talked about that in a lot of the key components of ag, including crop subsidies that Trump wants to do away with. But it also made sure that it was covering the whole part of rural communities, which is small businesses and healthcare and mental health care and our public schools. So we are proud, as you can tell. And, we're really proud that we're going to be hosting First Lady Gwen Walz. She was also a teacher in rural Nebraska. So, we feel all this momentum. And when I talk to my staff or the volunteers or the party leaders, they're like, this is literally what we've been working for the past 10 years. All of those late nights, long road drives on dirt roads, all of that is in this moment.
It's such an unbelievable testament to what you built and been working on for so long, Jane. And I think it really is like an incredible story for other states that are doing this work and slogging along and not getting as many of the national resources or attention to show that it's all possible. And you can also do a lot with a little. You mentioned $220,000, right? Some of these states are talking about getting millions and millions of dollars of support, but it's just a beautiful grassroots story. And I hope it does bring more resources into more states like Nebraska to put them on the map and truly make them battlegrounds that the national party is investing in and other folks are investing in. And so I guess I'm curious, what do you see after this election day in Nebraska and the path forward for the state, including what you think the outcomes are going to be in these really critical races?
I think there's a couple things. One, I always say that there's no red state, there's only under-resourced states. And so I think what's going to happen come election night is you're going to see, not because we can predict the races, but because we're going to work hard from now until then. I do think that we're going to win the electoral vote for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. I think Senator Vargas is going to get over the finish line. It's going to be a close race between Osborne and Fisher, but I definitely think he has the path to get there. I will say what we're also very focused on and what the resources that Simon and all the people who are watching have been able to give us can accomplish is we have to be worried about the legislative races, right? We were able to secure that electoral vote because we had 17 Democrats and independents. We're on track to hopefully get to 20. That's the path that we are now on. And we are only being able to do that because we have 2 races in rural Nebraska that were never on the map before, but are on the map this election cycle. So I just think it's a testament to not only donors who are investing in under-resourced states like Nebraska, but to all the grassroots people who just never give up. And that we built a cross-partisan coalition based on issues rather than party. Obviously, all eyes will be on us on election night, especially if it's a 269 race. And we are going to be there with big smiles and doing lots of hard work from now until then.
Jane, you've been kicking ass. It's so awesome to be on your team. Let's bring it home together. Let's close strong, right, in these coming weeks and win this thing. And just good luck to you and your amazing team out there.
Yeah, and watch that blue dot get bigger and bigger. Now we are so excited to be joined with our next guest, Adam Mockler. Adam is a content creator. He is part of the fast growing and influential Midas Touch Network online. And Adam, it's also, I hear, your birthday today. So happy birthday. And thank you so much for joining us on Closing Strong.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to chat. We are 30-something days out from the election, and it's high stakes. It is high stakes. So yeah, we have a lot to talk about.
It is very high stakes. And there was the VP debate this week also we want to chat about. But before we get into that, I know our audience is really curious about this. Obviously, content creators are playing a really outsized role in this election, the biggest role they've ever played. From my experience in any election in our history and in general, just in marketing and advertising and communications and news and media consumption. And folks don't know so much about it. And it's like a very fast growing and changing industry, and it's all about the individual. And so I have a million questions for you as a creator. How did you find yourself in this position? How did you become a content creator with over 500,000 subscribers on YouTube?
Yeah, so it's interesting because it happened really quickly, but it also happened over the span of a decade in a way. So the YouTube channel that I post on every single day, I started that YouTube channel when I was 7 years old, and I was posting Minecraft videos every single day, just like dumb video game stuff. But in the process of doing that, I learned how to edit really quickly and really efficiently. And then also, I was really involved in politics. I grew up in Indiana, and I was one of the only liberals in my school. I mean, there were other liberal people, but oftentimes I'd find myself talking to Republicans or their parents, my friends' parents who are Republicans. So with this YouTube channel that I had and these skills that I had built, and then the skills that I built in conversation, like for example, in 5th grade, I remember getting kicked out of my classroom because I was arguing with my teacher about gay marriage. And he was super Christian. He said that gay people choose to be gay and they shouldn't be able to choose to get married. And we argued about it. I got kicked out of the classroom, sent to the principal's office.
We have something in common. I got asked not to return to my Catholic high school for writing a pro-choice essay in religion class.
That is hilarious.
I'm so happy to hear that story.
I'm sure that planted the seeds for how you ended up in your position too, because you like to push back.
We are who we are.
Yeah, exactly. So like the broader point is when I graduated high school, I stopped doing YouTube in high school because I wanted to actually get girls and stuff. But when I graduated high school, I started YouTube again, and I was like, I bet I can combine my skills in talking politics, my skills in video editing into one cohesive series. And then I went to a Trump rally, and the way it happened was wild. And the main takeaway from the story I'm about to tell is you got to execute on your ideas. Because I had this idea for a while, and there was a Trump rally coming up 6 or 7 hours away, but it was 2 days from, let's say, like the day that I wanted to do it. So I emailed a bunch of cameramen in the area, a bunch of local cameramen. One dude hit me back and said, this is my only free Saturday for the next few months. Let's make it happen. We made it happen and went so viral. And now, a year and a half later, this dude's like my best friend, and we're hitting another Trump rally soon. So yeah, it all just fell into place within the past year. And then I got hired by Occupy Democrats, then Midas Touch. But as fast as it happened, it also, like, there's the whole phrase, like, the average overnight success takes 5 years. And I don't want to say I'm like the overnight success, but I have been doing this stuff for like over a decade. So with that in that context in mind, you can kind of see how I am where I am.
That is wild. But I also love that it isn't accidental at all. You really had a design around this, and you had the experience and the grit to do it. It's really cool.
I'm like an industry plant, the way it all happened so perfectly.
Tell us actually about that very first Trump rally and the video that went viral and really kind of, affirmed your suspicions that this could really hit a nerve with people.
Oh yeah, I remember being pretty nervous before it. That is absolutely natural. I'll remember that whole day vividly for the rest of my life. I sat down with my cameraman that I just met. We had breakfast and we talked about strategy. And I said, I think there's something like viral here. And then the first interaction we had, the lady began defending slavery. And she starts talking about the Civil War and, like some slave owners were humanistic. And then the next lady we talked to starts talking about the white hats and how Trump is really still the president controlling Biden. But then Biden is at fault for inflation and the wars. But then Trump is at fault for all the good stuff. Mind-blowing stuff. Boom, instant virality. And then off that, I really got better at being in the field too. So if you look at my newer MAGA rally stuff, I'm really good at breaking through to them and like inching them over to my position. And I think it's a really iterative process because you get used to their talking points. You figure out how to maneuver around them.
Yeah, and I think that there's a great fascination in the country for people who are not Trump supporters about Trump supporters, right? You hear all the time people say, I can't understand how you can support someone who has this many felony charges or has done X, Y, Z. And you're really kind of bringing out some of the humanity in them in this conversations, and that fascination has to be part of what does hit the nerve in terms of the viewership.
So how do you plan? I'm just interested about how you decide what you're going to do. So, for example, we've got 30 plus days left in the election. How are you thinking ahead about what you're going to do over this period? And then decide how you're going to dive in and go and execute some of your ideas.
Yeah, so I've been thinking actually a lot farther out in the future. Like I've only been thinking about 2028 and what I'm going to do in between this election cycle because I'm in such a good groove right now that it's all almost autopilot. So I wake up every day, I make 4 to 5 different videos. And then today, for example, I scheduled a few flights to a Trump rally, and we're just trying to knock out as much content we can in as little of a time as possible.
The volume is really important, right? In terms of keeping your subscriber base engaged and working with the algorithm. Talk a little bit about actually how it works on YouTube to be able to kind of get in front of more folks.
Yeah, I honestly think the Midas Touch output is unparalleled. I mean, they post like 15 videos a day. My channel is usually 6 to 7 videos a day. Sometimes it's 3 or 4, but that's all me just posting, editing, researching. It's a game. It's a game that you sometimes have to play. I'll always remember when I first started YouTube, I told my friends I never ever want to clickbait or do any of that type of stuff. But now my entire channel has turned into that because that is how you remain competitive in the algorithm. And everybody sort of says the same phrase, like nobody wants to be clickbaiting or using these yellow arrows, but I have 2 options. Either I stop doing it, my viewership drops to a fraction of what it is, and then I lose my ability to have an impact, or I remain competitive in a highly competitive field because it is a competition. Look at it like this. Like when you're in a grocery store and you're walking past and you see 4 different types of cereal, they try to make it visually appealing. So you pick that different type of cereal. It's the same thing as when people are scrolling through the algorithm. They're going to click on the video that is most appealing. So you're directly competing with other people who want to grab views. And then it turns into this, like, who can hit the bottom the fastest and just keep clickbaiting. But we're in a pretty good cycle right now. I'm in a pretty good spot to just very broadly between this election cycle and next election cycle. We're trying to change the digital media space in a post-Trump era is what I'm trying to say. So right now, if it's clickbaity or stuff like that, we're trying to pivot from that and really do more on the ground stuff like that. Yeah.
You just noted exactly why there will be a yellow arrow in the thumbnail for this interview.
It's important, like between being able to do this full time and being able to have an impact, or not doing yellow arrows. I mean, yeah, we're going to do the clickbait. And it seems like most people make that decision. I even see like big networks now sometimes using yellow text. And it's like, yeah.
It is the color.
What do you think has been most surprising about this journey you've been on? I mean, when you look back on it, I mean, what's been the thing that kind of was like, oh my God, I can't really believe this has really happened that way, that you didn't anticipate?
How well my vision mapped onto reality when all you have to do is execute. So like I read a book a few days before my first ever Trump rally, and this all sounds like too good to be true, but I read this book and it was like the difference between most people is like everyone has these great ideas, but nobody actually executes on them. So that is what I decided to do, because I was thinking about this Trump rally idea for a year and then I executed on it. And then it all happened very perfectly, where I was picked up by Occupy Democrats, picked up by Midas Touch, and now I'm working towards a broader vision, which I've touched upon a few times. In between election cycles, I really want to legitimize this sphere with on the ground journalism, with really breaking news stories like that are unparalleled in other spheres. And I think it's totally possible. And I'm hoping that my vision can continue to map onto reality as it has. But yeah, my most surprising is that, and also how close the election is. I struggle to understand it, but at the same time, I understand it very well because I've talked to these people, and a lot of times they're low information voters.
I want to talk about the stakes of this election, and one group of voters in particular that has made a lot of headlines this cycle, far more so than usual in all the years I have worked in politics, certainly, and that is young men of all races, especially Gen Z men. There is a bigger, more stark gender divide in the polls and in other kind of metrics of engagement, where we're seeing far more men, and especially younger men, move to the right, and far more women, including formerly kind of disengaged women, move to the left. You know, I think our strong hypothesis there is pretty clear that it's related to Dobbs and the issue of reproductive rights in healthcare. But I'm curious, you know, how much do you know about your audience, and in terms of actually as a young male who, as you self-described, is liberal, how do you think about communicating to and bringing more young men like you along with your content?
Yeah, I think about this a lot. So my audience is pretty evenly divided between younger people who watch me because I'm just like a chill Gen Zer, and then older people who have migrated from MSNBC in the traditional media over to the sphere for Midas Touch. And I honestly think that Mark Cuban going on Theo Vaughn is the exact model. Let me tell you a personal anecdote. I'm in a group chat with a bunch of my friends from high school. Like I said, I grew up in Indiana. I graduated high school in 2021, so it's a few years back. So I'm still friends. I'm still close with people who are Trump supporters and vote red. And, you know, my audience is always like, Adam, why don't you ditch those friends? Which is just weird. Like, I've known these people for years. I'm not that far removed from high school. But either way, we talk in this group chat about politics all the time. They're kind of right-leaning, but they're right-leaning in the sense that their parents are. They don't know anything about politics, and I can move them over on any issue, whether it's climate change or gay marriage. They agree with me on everything. And one of my friends said that watching Mark Cuban on Theo Vaughn's podcast changed the way he looks at politics and looks at Donald Trump, and he has a new understanding. So I think that Democrats need to be putting these interlocutors in the limelight more. I think that Tim Walz needs to go on Theo Vaughn. Tim Walz needs to go on like Howard Stern, or not even like a Joe Rogan, because I think that Tim Walz on a Joe Rogan is like what we need to be aiming for, but not Joe Rogan himself, because he's a little bit too far out there sometimes. But you get the model I'm going for. Enter this bro sphere, have Kamala Harris on Hot Ones, tap into these important cultural events and show people that, hey, like Democrats are cool. Because I think a lot of people right now think Democrats are super uptight. Maybe they're not like chill, but they are very cool people.
That's where I was going to actually dig a little, like a layer deeper on this, right? Like you said that your right-leaning friends agree with you on most issues like climate change and reproductive rights, et cetera. What do you think? Do you think it's the cultural disconnect and the coolness, as you mentioned, or is it related to business and the economy? Like, why do you think Mark Cuban is such a good messenger and sort of gateway for some of these guys that don't see themselves as part of the Democratic Party?
I think it's a messaging problem on the Democrats' behalf, because I went into all this, my whole political thing, with the idea that most Americans fundamentally agree with liberal issues if you don't even use liberal wording. This is Tim Walz's thing, but I've been saying this for a while too. When you go in for a surgery or some sort of trans checkup to see if you have gender dysphoria, these decisions should be kept between the parent, child and the doctor. The government shouldn't be stepping in. That is a liberal idea right there that conservatives agree with. Also, the idea that we should be funding Ukraine and protecting the interest of our allies, and also stopping Russia in its tracks. These are ideas that conservatives could get behind. So when you explain all of these ideas in a little bit of different wording, you wrap it in some conservative rhetoric, they agree with it. So my broader point is, I think that it's a messaging problem with Democrats where they need to go out there and they need to meet people where they're at. Pete Buttigieg is really good at doing this. And he actually talks about the importance of going on Fox News. A lot of times it's not these people's fault that they're not getting the right information. Like, yeah, they could seek it out, but they're being lied to by the Tucker Carlsons of the world. I went to a Trump rally a few months back, and this lady told me that all she needs, her main concern this election, is getting health care for her autistic son. He needs therapy, and she can't afford health care. And I said, do you think the government should be able to step in and provide like a safety net for people like you? She's like, of course, I just need a little bit of help. And I was like, what if I said the Democrats are providing that or offering that? She's like, no, that's communism. So like these people don't understand that liberalism is actually amazing. It's a great word. And I think the Democrats need to get out there. That's why part of my goal, again, I keep going in between election cycles. I want to get out there in the media circuit. I want to show people that liberalism can be cool. People think that it's all purple-haired college kids, but it's not. It's normal people.
So speaking of liberalism being cool, what was your take on the VP debate this week?
You know, debating is a skill that does not reflect on leadership, is what I'll say. So when I was watching them on stage, Tim Walz objectively looks like a better leader through and through. He showed all of the characteristics of leadership, but I do think JD Vance has a better grasp on debating in particular. I debate a lot on panels and at Trump rallies, so I'm not going to lie and say that Tim Walz is some debate lord who went for the jugular. I think that JD Vance seemed more slick and lawyer-like. He lied with everything he said. I don't even this shouldn't even need to be said, but I disagree with everything that JD Vance says. But I do think he was slick on stage. The moment where Tim Walz asks him, did Trump lose the 2020 election? I think that needs to be replayed over and over. That is a defining moment because it's just absolutely disgusting that these people are still undermining our elections. But my main takeaway is that JD Vance is a slick opportunist who doesn't really have any guiding principles other than grab power. And Tim Walz is a normal dude who is very likable and a great leader.
It's exactly right. And I think one of the silver linings of that debate is that actually a lot of the people who are either undecided or not planning to vote already were not watching the debate live. But if you do see clips of it, but then you see clips of Vance on any of the right-wing podcasts that he does all the time, it's a different person. He's like a chameleon, right?
He's awkward, yeah.
He plays the role that he needs to play. Like he played a compassionate person in parts of the debate last night. And then we've heard him say the least compassionate and empathetic things and just really egregious things about women in other formats. So my, big takeaway that I hope other folks have is that when you see those different versions of him, how can you trust him? Tim Walz is who he is everywhere he goes.
JD Vance is sane washing the entire MAGA universe. So, I mean, my audience got mad when I said that JD Vance was actually doing decently on stage because I think that he was well-spoken, but what he was saying was absolute BS because he was legitimizing Donald Trump's authoritarian beliefs with more slick rhetoric. So it's interesting because JD Vance is trying to tap more into this world of young men who are already, I don't like to be the dude that throws around the word misogyny all the time. Like, oh, you're misogynistic. I think that loses voters. But I have seen a lot of my friends in this group chat say like, oh, VP Harris is just annoying. There's something annoying about the way she speaks. That is absolutely misogyny. That is absolutely misogyny, like the definition of misogyny. So yeah, I think that JD Vance appeals to people who just want to be like a bro.
Adam, let me ask you a question. For older politicians, older Democrats who are trying to navigate both the legacy media and the new media that you're part of, what advice do you have for them in terms of how they can look at what you're doing, learn from it, and how it may affect their comms and their strategies going forward?
Yeah, have a diversity of sources. I think that if you're only watching traditional media, you're probably missing a lot of stuff on the outer edges of what's going on. And traditional media does both sides stuff a lot. I know it's kind of a meme at this point, but CNN does really both sides stuff a lot of times. And so does the New York Times when they shouldn't. But also, if you're only consuming alternative media, people also fall into this rabbit hole where they believe stuff too easily. I see it in my fan base too. After Trump was almost assassinated for the first time, I went live and a lot of them were fighting me about whether or not that was a blood packet on his ear or whether or not it was all fake. And I was trying to keep them in check. Like, hey, let's just go with what the Associated Press says. Let's go with what all of these independent organizations say. So there has to be a balance where you can't go full Alex Jones and just be trusting what independent media says. But also, if you're only consuming traditional media, again, you're missing a lot on the edges. So since I'm in alternative media or like this new media space, I'd say consume about 70% of us and then fact check it with AP News at the end of the day. That's what I do. I watch a lot of digital media, but then I'm always reading AP and BBC articles because they have people on the ground confirming stuff.
Too much of any one thing is a bad thing, right?
Yeah.
I am curious. There are a lot of male content creators on the right, and that kind of pullman over to the right. You mentioned Joe Rogan, but also folks like Charlie Kirk and Dan Bongino and all of the ones, Tim Pool, Dave Rubin, who are actually getting paid by Russia, et cetera. I'm really curious, do you actually spend time watching, consuming their content to kind of understand the other side of sort of this sphere of media and influence for an audience of younger men?
That is a great question. And yes, I love it. I had an obsession with listening to Charlie Kirk's podcast for a while, obviously, because I disagree with everything he says. But as somebody who goes out into the field and talks to MAGA, it's like seeing the source of where these talking points come from almost. So I'm interacting with these talking points, like a watered down version of them. But then when I listen to Charlie Kirk, I have a way better understanding of the MAGA world. So don't mistake it and think I'm enjoying Charlie Kirk because of what he's saying. I'm enjoying it because I have a way deeper understanding of where all of these people are coming from. And like, as much as I hate Charlie Kirk, he can explain what the deep state means to him more so than most MAGA supporters. So when I know Charlie Kirk's understanding of the deep state and I have a full understanding of it, it's a lot easier for me to punch back at MAGA rallies, you know?
I consume a lot of right-wing media. I know exactly.
It's like a guilty pleasure at some point, right? It's pretty good stuff.
But you have to know what they're saying. Like you said, it makes you better at your job too.
Yeah.
Listen, I did thousands of appearances on Fox News over 17 years, and it was incredibly important to my understanding of current politics. I feel lucky. I mean, it was hard and it was adversarial and difficult, but it also helped me come to a much greater understanding of them and where, they're trying to take the country. So I agree with you. Listen, man, you've done amazing things. We're all really proud of you. Let us know how we can help you in your journey in any way. I know we're running out of time. Tara, if you've got any final thoughts.
Just my last question is, I just want to understand, do you have a hand on the pulse of kind of what percentage of your audience you think are going to vote, especially the younger folks that follow you? And are you doing anything to encourage them to participate along with all of the great content you're producing?
Yeah, definitely. I talk about it every video. I drop vote.org, and I say that even voting isn't enough. There's so many ways to have your voice heard. You can canvass, you can phone bank. It's really smart to make sure your friends and family have a way to get to the voting booth on November 5th. Make sure that they're registered. Make sure that they have a way to get there, whether it's you giving them a car ride or finding them an Uber, some way. Get people to vote, mobilize people. Yeah, I think that when it comes to what percent of my audience is going to vote, basically everybody. Like, I doubt there's somebody watching me rag on Trump all day that isn't already registered unless they live in another country. As far as the younger people, it's kind of hard. A lot of them will mobilize. It's hard to tell because when I scroll through Twitter, there's an outsized voice where people are like, oh, F the establishment, we're not going to vote for either party. But then when I talk to people in real life, most Gen Zers are pretty liberal, like I said, and most of them do seem to understand what's at stake. So when I talk to Gen Zers in my audience, they all seem fired up and ready to vote. So sometimes Twitter can be misleading when you see all these Gen Zers saying like, oh, we're going to abstain totally. It's not always like that. That's
my deep hope, that there is a very large, brewing, quiet voter segment, especially around young people this time around.
I'm getting nervous about the election. I'm not going to lie, though. With 30 days to go, I'm getting nervous.
Oh, yeah. Clear eyes, do the work every single day, right? That's the job for all of us. So really grateful for the work that you're doing and the model that you're showing, hoping other young people take your steer. You can't get anything done if you don't execute on your vision. It sounds simple, but it is hard. It is important. It's true. And really glad and excited that you executed on yours and that it's playing a role in this critical election. So Adam, thank you so much for joining us. And happy birthday.
Thank you.
Happy birthday, Adam.
Thank you for having me on. And let's absolutely do this again, not only soon, but let's make it a recurring thing. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it would be great.
Thanks, Adam.